Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's ClicData webinar. A few words about ClicData. We're the world's first 100% cloud-based business intelligence solution. Why that's important is because everything's on the cloud now, and almost every application has the ability to connect to each other. You need a solution that can actually do this. ClicData was founded in 2009. We have offices in Canada, US, as well as in Europe and France. ClicData is on almost every continent. We have dedicated partners within Latin America, Asia, and Australia. Some interesting facts. We're currently managing over 1 million KPIs. These are customers who are using ClicData at a level of 1 million KPIs to manage their business. We have over 100,000 data sets, and we publish over 100 dashboards per hour. These are people leveraging ClicData, its ability to connect to any data anywhere. We also have the honor of being 4.5 out of 5 stars from G2 Crowd, as well as a 94% recommendation rate from Capterra. I'm going to summarize ClicData in 4 easy steps. Connect to any data, anywhere. Upload it to our data warehouse, which allows you to have a dedicated data warehouse where you can prepare that data any way you'd like, join, merge, cleanse. And then run it through our business analytics and visualization engine and create stunning actionable dashboards that you can share with anyone and anywhere. Today's agenda, we are going to talk about big data. Sri Neve, who is our subject matter expert, as well as in charge of professional services for ClicData, will be talking about BigQuery, Amazon Redshift, and optimizing your queries. It also will talk about creating meaningful reports with that. So with that, I'm going to turn that over to Sri.
Thank you, Rob, for the introduction. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about introduction to big data. So big data is a very old concept. It was introduced in early 2000s, and I would say it even goes beyond that. And it has been used for several years now, but the hype has started recently about big data. I like to put it in this way that really what big data does is it's an act of gathering and storing large amounts of information for eventual analysis purposes. Typically, when you're working with big data, there are 3 different characteristics of what qualifies as big data. They call them as the 3 Vs, and you start off with the volume. So when you're working with big data, you're actually processing low density unstructured data, but at a very high volume. So you have your Twitter data feeds coming in, you have your click streams coming in on a web page, or you have some sort of sensor enabled for Internet of Things, and you're collecting terabytes of data into the system, or for some, it might even go up to petabytes of data. The second characteristic, what I would say for a big data is the velocity. So sometimes the data stream that is already coming in terabytes and petabytes must be dealt with a timely manner. Consider you have an RFID system in your retail store. A lot of users are walking in, picking up different products from the store. Every second they walk in or every second they pick up different products from the store, the RFID is creating a stream of data and sending it back to your database. And when you're working with big data or a system of big data collection, you need to make sure that the data that is coming out of this RFID is being captured in a very timely manner. So that's why the velocity at which the data comes in plays an important characteristic while working with big data. And the third thing is the variety of the data. So it's not just one specific form of data that you're working with. You're in a business, you're working with a lot of different applications. You're working with structured data, you're working with unstructured data. You have traditional databases, you have new databases that have come in. So you're working with a lot of different variety of data sources. And that's where the variety piece comes in. And these 3, volume, velocity, and variety, actually form your characteristics about big data. In today's world, big data is used pretty much in every sector. So I've put in a few different sectors where big data has been used, and to kind of correlate your business to this example. In terms of marketing, if you're running a marketing company, a marketing agency, you're collecting data from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and people are typing in tweets every second. So you have big streams of data coming into your database, and you're trying to make sense of all these marketing modules that I've been working on into eventually for analysis purpose and to display to your customers in a seamless manner or in a manner that is much more manageable and easy for them to understand. Even while working with e-commerce, the very same example, you have transaction data coming in, you have orders being placed every minute on your website, you have different products that are being added on your website every minute, or you are managing your inventory every minute. And again, it's generating big streams of data. So while working with e-commerce, because you're generating that amount of data, you're most likely working with big data. Healthcare is a classic example. Healthcare requires different clinical files, patient information, physician information, and every second when you're into this healthcare sector, you're collecting information about something or the other. And to make sense for this vast amount of data, you need some different tools that allow you to work with big data and to be able to process the data at a much faster rate. And some other examples include geolocations or government entities. Government is also collecting data on a daily basis, and they're collecting large amount of data to monitor macroeconomic indicators. This being about big data and a few use cases about big data, I want to start telling you how ClicData comes into your big data flow. So you might be using the different tools available to store your big data. Some could be using Hadoop, some could be using BigQuery, some could be using Amazon Redshift, and there are a few others that are also available. Once you have stored the information, that particular product allows you to capture this large amount of data and store it in one centralized database. But now you need to start processing this data to make some meaningful insights out of it. And that's where ClicData comes in. Other tool could be Hive. Hive works on Hadoop, and you could use Hive to start processing your data. And ultimately, once you have processed your data, you have simplified those unstructured data into a more structured manner. You can now analyze the data, and that's where, again, ClicData comes into the whole architecture where you can use ClicData to analyze this information. Having spoken about what big data is, a little bit of basics, I want to talk about how you can add value to your big data with ClicData. So what ClicData does, to kind of go back to what Rob already mentioned, a few things on how we are an end-to-end product, not just an end-to-end product, we also provide a robust environment to you. We allow you to slice and dice your data. You're working with petabytes of data, terabytes of data. You need to eventually optimize this data to a certain smaller subsets and be able to display that subset to your customer. If you're going to go with petabytes of data to your customers, that information is redundant for them. They won't be able to make any meaningful insights out of that. And that's where ClicData comes into the equation, where you can actually slice and dice your data to be able to optimize it and eventually display it to your customer. And that takes me to the next point. Eventually, you have to derive insights from this data. So using the environment, you're slicing and dicing, you're making a structured environment, and then displaying that information back to your customer. The other thing what you can do with ClicData is when you create a dashboard on ClicData, it's a cloud-based platform. You're creating a dashboard that can be accessed anywhere. So you don't need any kind of big data tools to access it. All you need is a browser and internet, and you can access the information at any point of time. It's not limited to one user. You have one platform, but multiple users can now access your data, and these users can make educated operational changes into your business. And eventually, our goal is to make everything simple and manageable, and that's how we add value to your entire business. Next, we are going to talk about BigQuery. So here we are going to switch between a little bit of slides to an actual demo. I'm going to use ClicData to showcase how we can connect to BigQuery, how you can understand the data table names and data sets on your BigQuery. We'll showcase a little bit about how you can write a query on ClicData. And if you're already using BigQuery, you might be working with views. So we'll talk about how you can import views onto ClicData. So let me just go ahead and switch my screen so we can move to a live demo. The first thing what you do is once you get onto the product, you need to start connecting your BigQuery account. To do so, you click on the Data tab, you click on Add New, and the very first time you're doing it, you have to click on Add New Connection. Go ahead and select your Google BigQuery. It's going to ask you to authorize the connection. So I'm going to say this is my Google BigQuery. I'm going to give a name for demo. Authorize the connection. It redirects me to my Google account. I select the Google account of my choice. And once I select the Google account, it's going to ask me, do you allow ClicData to manage your data in BigQuery? So just go ahead and click allow. And now we are connected to your Google BigQuery account. You might be working with multiple projects on your BigQuery. So I'll go back to my BigQuery account and I'll show you a few different projects that I'm working on. So I'm working on 3 different projects, and that's what it's asking me to select at this stage. What kind of project do you want to go ahead and select? So I want to select my e-commerce project. I go and pick that. Once I select my e-commerce project, it's going to ask me what dataset do I want to select from the e-commerce project. So if I go back to BigQuery, within my project, I have different resources and different datasets that I can choose from. And I would like to choose my transaction dataset. So I select my transaction dataset and I click Next. At this point, ClicData is already connected to your transaction dataset and the e-commerce database from BigQuery. The next step, what you could do is now you can start writing in different queries. You can either type in the query directly, or if you're not familiar with what query you want to type in, you can also use the designer mode. So once you click on the designer mode, ClicData displays you a name of all the different data tables that you have on your BigQuery. It's as simple as this. All you need to do is select all of them, click OK, and we automatically type in the query for you. You can click on preview to get a quick preview of what information is going to come back to ClicData. You click on next, and that particular table now gets imported to ClicData. At this stage, you can also go ahead and set up an automation that I want ClicData to go back to my BigQuery and update the data on a daily basis. And I've added a schedule, and now ClicData goes back and keeps refreshing the data on a regular basis. So this is just a quick glimpse of how we connect to BigQuery. We'll also go ahead and start creating some dashboards using this. But before we go and create a dashboard using this data set, I would like to talk about Redshift as well. Going back to our slides, when you're connecting to Redshift, I'll showcase how you set up a direct connection with Redshift. A lot of times when you're working with Redshift, a question that I get on an ongoing basis is, how do you whitelist ClicData's IP addresses on Redshift? So we'll talk a little bit about that, how you can whitelist ClicData's IP addresses using Redshift. And also we'll talk about using macros on ClicData. When you're working with big data, you need to be able to understand how to get incremental information on ClicData rather than uploading petabytes of data to ClicData. Or you also need to understand how you can write grouped queries onto ClicData. So let's go back to the live demo. In order to connect to Redshift, a very similar approach as before. We start by saying add new connection. You go ahead and select Redshift. And once you select Redshift, it's going to ask you to enter the server name and database. If you're not familiar working with Redshift, I want to walk you through how the Redshift portal looks like. So once you get an account on Redshift, you have different clusters that you can work with. And ClicData will connect to one cluster at one particular time. So if you want to connect to a specific cluster that you already have, click on the clusters. And once you click on the clusters, you click on the cluster name, which populates certain information about that cluster. You need to copy the endpoint that needs to be endpoint for the cluster. So just go ahead and copy that. And once you have copied the endpoint for the cluster, just go ahead and specify the endpoint right here. You would notice at the end of that address, I also have a port number called as 5439. You don't need to have this port number on the server address, so you could just remove that port number at this stage. However, you do need to set up that port on ClicData. In order to set up that port on ClicData, you go to the options and you start by specifying the port number right here, which is 5439, the port I was using on my Amazon Redshift. Once you have done this initial configuration, you need to set up the authentication for your Redshift. I know the username and password for my Redshift account, so I'm just going to go ahead and use that. And I also need to specify the database name. If you're not sure about the database name, you can always go to the query editor on Redshift, and once you click on the query editor, you would get the database name right at the top here. Once I have specified my information, I can click on test connection and I can see that the connection is working fine. That means I'm already connected to Redshift. You'll note here that we're using a direct connection to connect to Redshift. Many times your Redshift cluster might not be accessible to everyone outside your organization's network. So you might need to whitelist ClicData's IP addresses so that we can access your Redshift cluster. So we'll talk a little bit about how you can go about doing that. If you want to whitelist ClicData's IP addresses, all you have to do is click on cluster and you have to go to the cluster name. And once you go to the cluster name, you'll have a section called as VPC security groups. You have to click on the security groups to access the different security options that you have for that particular cluster. Once you're on the security group, you click on inbound, and this is where you can start adding your cluster groups. So you can click on edit inbound rules. We have a section on our website on the help documentation where we tell you exactly what kind of IP addresses you would need to whitelist if your account is in the East US server or if your account is on the North European server with ClicData. Let's say my account is with the East US server on ClicData. So I need to copy this particular IP address, go back to my Amazon Redshift, add a rule for all TCP, specify custom, and just go ahead and enter the IP address right here. And this would be for my ClicData East US server. By doing this, you're allowing ClicData to go ahead and to connect to your database or your cluster. If you don't do this, and if you have IP restrictions on your cluster, then we won't be able to make any connections to that particular cluster. So this is a little bit about how you go ahead setting up a connection to Redshift. Once you do that, you can click next, and as BigQuery, now you have an option to click on the designer and actually access all the tables that you have on your Redshift cluster. So let's go ahead and import the same table onto ClicData, which is the orders table. I'll click OK. I click on preview and I can quickly get a glimpse of my orders table. Until now, we've been working on very simple basic queries. While working with big data or large amounts of data, the initial upload and trying to upload everything to ClicData works fine. But if you're doing refreshes every minute, I would not recommend you uploading the entire table every minute because that creates now you have to upload millions of rows every minute and the past data is not actually changing. So you might just want to upload the new data to ClicData. So let's say I have a table called as orders. I'm going to go ahead and upload that table first to ClicData. I'll say select star from orders. I'll also optimize this query and I'll say where right now I want to upload everything where my created date is less than today's date. I click on preview to get a quick glimpse of again if my query is working fine and if I'm extracting the data. It seems to be fine. I give a name to this data set and I'll call this as orders until November 6th. This is my first upload, so that's why I'm uploading my entire table, which is containing thousands of rows onto ClicData. Once I have uploaded the first table, moving forward, I don't want ClicData to go back and retrieve the entire information. Let's say I'm doing a daily upload. I want ClicData to only get the recent transactions. For me to do that, the first thing I need to do is go ahead and specify a unique key on my data table. So I can do that by clicking on Schema and specifying a unique key. Once I specify a unique key, we'll make sure any future updates, whatever you're doing, if the same row is added to ClicData, we'll either update that particular transaction ID onto ClicData, or if new IDs are added to ClicData, we'll keep on appending those new rows onto ClicData. Now that a unique key has been set up, we need to figure out how to get only today's data rather than getting the entire data set. A simple way of doing this could be you could specify today's date and you could say, I want to get today's data, that is 7th of November, and I'll get everything. But doing this on a daily basis is not ideal. You want ClicData to do this automatically. So we have something called as macros. Whenever you specify 2 curly brackets, you can actually start writing formulas within those 2 curly brackets. And I'll introduce you to the concept on how you can create those formulas on ClicData. In order to be able to create those formulas, the easiest way is to access a dashboard module. And once you're on the dashboard module, just drag and drop a number indicator. And within the number indicator, start by working on a formula on the number indicator. We have different functions. Some of them are called as datetime functions. So let's say I want to get only today's data. We have a function called as today. So it could be as simple as writing today, and I'll always get today's data. So now that I know which function I need to use, I go back to ClicData where I'm writing in the query. And instead of saying a fixed static date, I actually write in today. And if I run this query now, it will only retrieve me data for today. Thus, you have set up some sort of automated macro rule onto ClicData. I click on save, it imports the data for today, and moving forward, I can always set up an automated schedule where I'm retrieving, where I'm doing an update and append, and I'm retrieving the data. I'm keeping the data that I have on ClicData, and I'm adding the new rows of data on a daily basis. So this is about working with Redshift or working with macros. You could work with macros not just on Redshift, you could work with macros even on databases. So if you're connecting to a SQL database, a MongoDB, you could still use macros on ClicData. While you're working with BigQuery, we spoke briefly about how to extract the table from BigQuery. But what about views? You might have views on BigQuery. How can you extract views? So I do have a view called as product status group, which I've already created on BigQuery. And if I want to extract that particular view, I can simply type in the name of that particular view, and ClicData will go in and extract that view. So a view also behaves like a table. Here you can see I've already grouped my orders data into certain status, product name, and the total revenue that I'm generating. If you don't want to do groupings on BigQuery, you can also do groupings on ClicData. So I'll show you an example where we can do groupings on ClicData. Going back to my orders table, I select star from orders. I get all the information, and now I would like to group it rather than getting the entire data. Eventually, my audience is interested to see on a monthly basis for a particular product, what was my sales. This is the information I need to display to my audience. For me to display that information to the audience, I don't need to import the entire data set. I can be selective about my approach, and I can just go ahead and already group the data and then bring it to ClicData. So I have a query that does the grouping. I go to my query table and I can type in the query which already extracts a year from my date, the month from my date, and it groups it by year, month, status, and product ID. Now that I have a query that I've built which does the grouping, I can bring in the group data to ClicData rather than bringing a transactional data. This not only helps you to manage your data easily, but also helps you to optimize the performance of your reporting, optimize and eventually give this data set to your end users without them having to know what is happening on your billions of rows behind. So you're creating a much simplified view that anyone now can go in and they can understand this data and they can work with this. This is kind of the objective while working with ClicData. You want to simplify everything and eventually hand over the simplified data to your end users. So let's go ahead and import this data as well. So I spoke a few different ways on how you can optimize your data while importing to ClicData, how you can create views, or how you can use macros while getting the data to ClicData. Once you have done these processes and once you have worked with the data set, eventually you need to create a dashboard that can be shared with your end users. In order to create a dashboard, all you have to do is go to the dashboard tab, click on add new, start by giving a name. This is my e-commerce dashboard. And I can choose what kind of visualizations do I want to display on that particular dashboard. So we have more than 40 different visualizations that you can use to display on the dashboard. You can pick any of them and you can go ahead and display on the dashboard. Since the focus of this demo is still on big data, I want to move towards a dashboard that is already pre-built. And I want to show you an example of using this e-commerce dashboard to build a particular report that can be shared with your customers. So we have connected to BigQuery, we have extracted all the information, and ultimately what we have done is we have created this dashboard which displays sales summary, total orders, total revenue, everything that is important for the customers. You also have different tabs where you can navigate from one dashboard to the other dashboard, and which displays you a more in-depth information now, such as product summary, or you have something called as invoice or financial summary or regional summary. Once you create that dashboard, you can share it with your end users, and even if you're working with millions of rows of data, you have optimized the entire flow to eventually come up with this simplified version of your data set, which you can share with your end users. Going back to our presentation, I spoke about how it's necessary to optimize and slice and dice your data. So I wanted to put in a little bit of flow of what anyone working with big data should take care of. Big data has billions of rows. Really, the objective should be to simplify this data from billions of rows, get down to smaller subsets of data set. At every point, think about the audience. What are you trying to do for the audience? What is the objective for your audience, or what does your audience want to see? So try to simplify your data so it makes sense for your audience. And once you have simplified it, you derive meaningful insights using that particular information and share it with your audience. So you're trying to create a virtual wall between your big data, the billions of rows that you have, and a much more simplified version of that, which can be now available onto ClicData and which you can share with your audiences. So this is a little bit about what we have done, how you can work with big data. At this stage, if you have any questions, I would love to take them on. If you have any questions related to the product, if you have any questions related to big data, I'd like to take those on so that I can answer those to you. Great. So I do have one question in terms of how we can share this report with your end users. The easiest way to share the report with your end user is using a live link. When you create a dashboard on ClicData, you can easily create a live link out of it and just copy this live link and share it with your end users. Your end users get easy access to the dashboard at any point of time. All they have to do is go to the live link. On the back end, everything is connected to your source data, and the data set is being refreshed on an ongoing basis, and they can go to this particular live link and access the final output of the results. You can also share this using a PDF. So if you need to set up a publication, you can say, I want to do a publication on the dashboard. You decide the frequency and the schedule. I want to send a dashboard every morning at 9 or every morning at 12. ClicData will automatically send the dashboard to the recipients that you have added on this list. I see another question in terms of this question is if there are any limitations while in terms of number of clusters we can connect to or number of BigQuery accounts that ClicData can connect to. No, we don't have any limitation. So it doesn't, if you have one ClicData account, you can actually connect to multiple clusters.
Hi, Shri. We do have another question talking about, can we export data out of ClicData for use in other systems or for internal programming use?
Great question, Rob. Absolutely. So I do have a lot of customers who have told me that they've been using ClicData so that they can process the data, they can work with merges, fusions on ClicData or create views on ClicData so that they can have the ETL layer on ClicData, but ultimately they want to extract that information from ClicData back to a different tool. So we do have options to do that. I can set up a task. I want to send my data as a CSV or an Excel and select the data set. It could be the process data that you have on ClicData, and you can send it to a particular recipient as a CSV or an Excel. Instead of this, you also have another option, which we allow through an API. We have different endpoints available. One of the endpoint is to get the data out of ClicData. You can, once you create this application using the API and that endpoint, you can now automatically extract the process data out of ClicData to a separate tool of your choice. And the last option that we have for certain tier of subscription is a database option. If you have an dedicated enterprise account on ClicData, you also have an option to set up a database of your choice. ClicData will give you a database. It will give you the server name, the database name, a user ID, and now you can see all the files that you have on ClicData like any other SQL database. And that could also be one option that you can use to extract the data from ClicData to something else.
Shri, I think that's it. So at this point, I believe we're set. Thank you everyone for joining us. We will have the webinar on our site. There'll be a link to that. You'll be able to download that and share as you see fit. And again, everyone, thank you very much for your time today. Enjoy the rest. We hope you got some benefit out of our webinar today. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.